One can never accuse Insomniac Games of resting on their laurels. Having completed 3 best-selling games following a similar format, they decided to take the Ratchet & Clank series in a slightly different direction for the 4th entry into the franchise, dropping Clank from the title and shifting the focus from action-adventure to just plain action. It was an interesting move, but unfortunately, it's not one that worked out as well as the developers might have hoped. The plot is a slight step back from earlier games, being relatively simple. Ratchet, Clank, and technician friend Al are abducted from their comfortable life in charge of the Phoenix Starship and are forced to appear on Dread Zone, a televised gladiatorial show where heroes are forced to fight for their lives. As Team Darkstar, Ratchet does all the fighting while the others perform maintenance and try and find a way to escape. That's about it. No real twists or deviations, just you fighting your way through hundreds of challenges while all the interesting plot-related stuff happens in the background out of sight. The tone of the game is drastically different to its predecessors. It's no longer lighthearted and fun, instead being a much darker game, with any humour found being as dark as the plot, and that plot deals with the deaths of heroes as sport. That said, not much is made of this. They don't mine it for pathos or anything, it's just how things are here. The way it's all cobbled together, though, the whole game feels more like a string of random ideas thrown into a mixing pot, then glazed with a half-baked plot taken from the Arnold Schwarzenegger film The Running Man. I'm guessing Insomniac are fans.
Don't forget to send me a copy.
The gameplay, as you'd expect, is very similar to the previous Ratchet & Clank game. You control Ratchet as he runs around shooting things and moving forward until he reaches something, at which point he activates a crank or hacks an orb to deactivate a force field before moving on to the next point, and so on and so on. Unlike previous games, there's very little deviation from this, and as a result, the game gets old very quickly. You're just doing the same thing over and over again, with very little variation as to how and why. Your arsenal of weapons seems to reflect the game's change in tone. There's no fun, light-hearted weapons here, just pure combat tools. You've got your standard machine gun, shotgun, sniper rifle, turrets, rocket launcher, shield gun, and mace. Yeah, mace. And the few other guns they have aren't all that imaginative. You can customize your weapons with different mods, like freezing enemies with every shot, or being able to transform them into a variety of farmyard animals, but none of these seem particularly original, as if Insomniac was running out of ideas when it came to this one. As is usual by now, these weapons gain experience, and eventually levels with every enemy killed using them. While previous games had your weapons maxed out at level 5, in Deadlocked you can level your guns up to an initial maximum of 10, while in challenge mode you can go all the way up to level 99. The problem is that there's very little impetus to do so, since the weapons don't seem to do all that much more damage once you pass a certain level. A level 50 weapon doesn't seem any more powerful than it did at level 40, for example. Having a lower maximum level with a more significant reward for reaching it would probably have worked better. Assisting in the combat are 2 combat bots, Merc and Green, with personalities to match their names. Together they assist in basic combat, and at your command can send out EMP blast to short up various shields or temporarily disable enemies. The AI of these bots is for the most part pretty good, but they do have the occasional habit of getting stuck on scenery or targeting an enemy completely out of sight. Their dialogue, though, which takes the form of banter between themselves, is often very funny, and it's one of the few moments the game manages to bring a smile to your face. Unfortunately, the rest of the game's dialogue isn't quite so good. As Dread Zone is a television show, there are a pair of presenters who add their own comments to the proceedings. This works fairly well during the introduction to a challenge, when the male announcer provides a quick overview of what you'll need to do, but during the actual gameplay, the limited number of lines these announcers have been given will often repeat themselves. This was also the case in the combat arena sections of previous Ratchet & Clank games, but it was forgivable because those combat sections were relatively short. Here, the entire game is essentially a series of combat arenas. As a result, it's not uncommon to hear the same line around a dozen times within an hour. It's far from the biggest problem in the world, but it does get very annoying after a while. Unlike previous games in the series, there's no hidden bolts here, which means that there's no reason to actually explore the levels. The skill points have also been changed, with there being loads more, 15 per planet, and the player being told up front what they have to do to achieve them. But there's very little reason to actually get them. The only real reward for doing so is more money, which you get plenty of as is. As mentioned, challenge mode returns, but by the time you'll have finished the game, you'll probably want to do something else rather than play the whole thing all over again. You can play all of the individual challenges on an additional difficulty level, but the only reason to do so is to unlock a few more bonus skins. And given how you can continue to access any challenge you've already finished throughout the game without needing to restart the game, like in previous games, there's really no real point to having a challenge mode at all. If you want to play the first mission again, with all the weapons you've collected throughout the game, you can do that at any point. So really, there's not that much point in having a challenge mode, except for the fact that it's the only way to access the hardest difficulty level, and Yeah, the game's enough of a slog as is without it being ridiculously difficult as well. Finally, there's the multiplayer mode, which builds upon the one they introduced in Ratchet Clank 3. There's new stages, skins, and ways of playing, and it's as technically proficient as ever, but ultimately it's just not as fun as the one from the previous game, and just like that one, it's a little hard to find anyone still playing it. In the end, there's nothing wrong with Deadlocked. It's a very professional title, and it's very much an Insomniac game, but there's also nothing spectacular about it either. It's a very dark, unrelenting, and ultimately tiring game that doesn't really seem to reward progress through it. As a result, I can imagine a fair few people not actually playing through it to the end. Basically, if you thought there was too much combat in the third game, Deadlocked is not for you. There's far better games in the series, but as we'll see, there's also far worse.